Good day, everyone. I am Brother Jesuit Bedro from St. Joseph de Mindanao Seminary, a second-year student taking an AB Philosophy pre-divinity track. Today, I will discuss on you the two fallacies that assigned to me: the argument against the person, and the second one is the accident. The objectives of my presentation today is first, the fallacy, types of fallacy. Second, the definitions. Third, the examples. And of course, the explanation. First, the first fallacy that assigned to me is the argument against the person. The arguments against the person, this fallacy always involves two arguments. One of them advances either directly or implicitly a certain argument, and the other then responds by directing his or her attention not to the person's argument, but to the person himself. This argument against the person have three forms. First, the ad hominem abusive, or to the abusive man. Second, the ad hominem circumstantial. It means to the circumstantial man. Lastly, tu quoque. It means you too. The first argument against the person is the ad hominem abusive. It means to the man, to the abusive man. Ad, ad hominem abusive, it is a response. It is a response by the second persons to the first person's arguments by verbally abusing the first person. For example, the television entertainer Bill Mayer argues that religion is just a lot of foolish nonsense. But Mayer is an arrogant, shameless, self-righteous pig. Obviously, his arguments are not worth listening to. To explain on it, for example, to explain in my example, the author of this argument ignores the substance of Mayer's argument and instead attacks Mayer's himself. However, because Mayer's personal attributes are irrelevant to whether the premises of the religion arguments support the conclusion, the argument attacking him is fallacious. Not all cases of ad hominem abusive are so blunt, but they are just fallacious. For example, a Secretary of State Hillary Clinton argues that Israel should hold the line on new settlements in Palestine. But Clinton is not Jewish, and she has never had any great affection for Israel. Thus, her arguments are worthless. To explain on it, again, whether Hillary Clinton is Jewish and whether she does or does not have any great affection for Israel have nothing to do with whether her premises support her conclusion. The second form of the, the second form of arguments against the person is the ad hominem circumstantial, or to the circumstantial man. It begins in the same way in ad hominem abusive, but instead of heaping verbal abuse on his or her opponent, the respondent attempts to discredit the opponent's argument by alluding to certain circumstances that affect the opponents. By doing so, the respondent hopes to show that the opponent is predisposed to argue the way he or she does and should therefore not be taken seriously. For example, the Dalai Lama argues that China has no business in Tibet and that the West should do something about it. But Dalai Lama just wants the Chinese to leave so he can return as leader. Naturally, naturally, he argues this way. Therefore, we should reject his arguments. To explain it, in this argument, it ignores the substance of Dalai Lama's arguments and attempts to discredit it by calling attention to certain circumstances that affect the Dalai Lama, namely, that he wants to return to Tibet as its leader. But the fact that the Dalai Lama happens to be affected by these circumstances is irrelevant to whether his premises support a conclusion. Ad hominem circumstantial is easy to recognize because it is always takes this form. Of course, Mr. X argues this way. Just look at the circumstances that affect him. And lastly, on the argument against the person, the last form of the argument against the person is the tu kukui. It means you too. Fallacy begins the same way as the other two varieties of the ad hominem argument, except the second arguer attempts to make the first appear to the hypocritical or arguing in a bad faith. The second arguer usually accomplishes this by citing features in the life of in the life or behavior of the first arguer that conflict the latter's conclusion. The fallacy often takes the form, how dare you argue that I should stop doing X? Why you do or have done X yourself? For example, a political operative Newt Gingrich has argued about the need to preserve family values. But who is he to? Gingrich has been married 3 times. He divorced his first wife while she was hospitalized for cancer, and he engaged in an extramarital affair while he was married to his second wife. Clearly, Gingrich's arguments are trash. To explain, again, the details of Gingrich's personal life are irrelevant to whether his premises support his conclusion. Thus, this argument is fallacious. Fallacious. Always be in the mind that the purpose of an ad hominem argument is to discredit another person's argument by placing its author in a bad light. Thus, for the fallacy to be committed, there must be always two arguers, at least implicitly. If it should turn out that the person being attacked is not an arguer, then the personal comments made by the attacker may well be relevant to the conclusion that is drawn in general. In general, personal observations are relevant to conclusion about what kind of person someone is: good, bad, stingy, trustworthy, and so forth, and whether a person has done something. For example, Zimbabwe's President Robert Mugabe has tortured, murdered, and terrorized the people of his own country, corrupted elections, and stolen millions of dollars from the public treasury. Mugabe is therefore a thoroughly disgusting and despicable human being. To explain it, the conclusion is not that Mugabe's arguments is a bad, but that Mugabe himself is bad, because the premises give relevant support to the conclusion. The argument commits no fallacy. Another example: Shakespeare cannot possibly have written 36 plays attributed to him, because the real Shakespeare was a two-bit country businessman who barely finished the fourth grade in school and who never left the confines of his native England. The conclusion is not that, to explain on it, the conclusion is not that some argument of Shakespeare's is bad, but that Shakespeare did not write a certain place. Again, since the premises are relevant to this conclusion, the arguments the argument commits no ad hominem fallacy. To conclude, yet there is often a close connection between truth and believability, and this provides one of the reasons why the ad hominem arguments are often effective. In evaluating an argument, there are always two issues to be considered. First, the quality of the reasoning, and the second, the truth of the premises. As noted, both are irrelevant to the personal characteristic of the arguer. But whether we accept the premises as true may depend on the credibility of the arguer. Knowing that the arguer is biased or has a motive to lie may provide good grounds for distrusting the premises. Another reason why ad hominem arguments are effective in that they engage the emotions of reader and listeners, and thereby motivate them to transfer their negative feelings about the arguer onto arguments. For the second, for the second assigned fallacy to me is the accident. Accident. The fallacy of accident is committed when a general rule is applied to a specific case it was not intended to cover. Typically, the general rule is cited either directly or implicitly in the premises and then wrongly applied to a specific case mentioned in the conclusion. The fallacy of accident gets its name from the fact that one or more accident features of the specific case make it an exception to the rule. For example, freedom of speech is a constitutionally guaranteed right. Therefore, John Q. Radical should not be arrested for his speech that incited the riot last week. Another example, people are obligated to keep their premises. When Jessica married Tyler, she promised to stay with him for life. Therefore, we should stay we should stay with him now, even though he has become an abusive spouse addicted to gambling and drugs. To explain on it, on the first example, the general rule is that freedom of speech is normally guaranteed, and a specific case is speech made by John Q. Radical. Because the speech incited a riot, the rule does not apply in the rule does not apply. In the second example, the general rule is that people are obligated to keep their premises, and the specific case is that Jessica should keep her promise to stay with Tyler. The rule does not apply because Tyler is no longer the same person that Jessica made her promise. On the other hand, the first example, the accidental features is the speech incited riot. In the second example, the accidental features are that Tyler has become abusive, a spouse, and addicted to gambling and drugs. And once again, I am Jesuit Pedro, a second-year student taking an AB Philosophy Fraternity track, a seminarian from St. Joseph de Mindanao Seminary in Kamamanan. Thank you for your listening. Have a blessed day to all listeners. Thank you.